Today's story is one of the most chilling and heart-wrenching cases you'll ever hear. It's a tale of love, jealousy, and betrayal that spirals into a shocking and brutal murder. The twists and turns in this story will keep you at the edge of your seat as you realize just how dark and twisted a love triangle can become when obsession takes over.
Very, very good. Because
Okay, so what makes you think somebody poisoned your food?
because she was my ex-girlfriend. She came to visit me.
You think your ex-girlfriend's done it?
Yeah.
Before we begin, please note, all the details in this story are based on real events, backed by credible sources. For transparency, you can find links to all sources and reports in the description below. This is the story of Lakhvir, a young woman born in the culturally rich but traditional land of Punjab, India. From the start, Lakhvir was different. She was a free spirit with big dreams of exploring the world, expanding her horizons, and living life on her own terms. She wanted to experience everything, new cultures, new ideas, and make her mark on the world. But in a society that still clings tightly to tradition, Lakhvir's dreams were about to clash with reality. As she grew older, Lakhvir's family began thinking about her future, more specifically, her marriage. In Punjab, marriages are often arranged, and for Lakhvir it was no different. Her parents, like many others, believed that an ideal match for their daughter would be a man who was stable and well-off. When they found Lakhvir Singh, a man who lived in London and had built a solid life there, they thought they had found the perfect match. London was not just any city, it was a dream destination for many families in Punjab. A son-in-law living in London was a sign of success and prosperity, a future filled with opportunities. The prospect of Lakhvir moving to London filled her parents with pride. They believed this was a chance of a lifetime. But Lakhvir wasn't ready. She wasn't excited about this arranged marriage. Her heart still clung to the dream she had for herself. Yet faced with the pressure of her family's expectations and the fear of disappointing them, she agreed. Her acceptance wasn't one of joy, but of quiet resignation. After the wedding, Lakhvir packed up her life, said goodbye to the familiar faces of her hometown, and boarded a plane to London, unsure of what awaited her. She left behind the hopes and dreams of her youth, but deep inside, a small flicker of hope remained. Maybe, just maybe, this new life would bring her the happiness she had always yearned for. Little did she know, that journey would lead her down a dark and terrifying path. Lakhvir's new life in London was nothing like the one she had left behind in Punjab. The towering buildings, the bustling streets, and the faces of strangers, it was all overwhelming. So the peaceful, simple life she had known felt like a distant memory, swallowed by the relentless pace of city life. At first, life with Aconite seemed stable. He had a steady job in South and West London, and together they began building a life of family. They welcomed 3 children, and from the outside, it looked like everything was falling into place. A happy family in one of the world's most exciting and diverse cities, everything they had dreamed of was right there, in front of them. But for Lakhvir, something was missing. She had hoped that life in London would fulfill the dreams she once held close. But instead, she felt an aching emptiness inside. Despite having a family, despite the comforts, the life she was living wasn't the life she had imagined. Yet she kept her feelings hidden, choosing to focus on her responsibilities as a wife and mother. She supported Aconite, took care of their children, and tried her best to make the most of her new life. And then, without warning, everything changed. Lakhvir's world turned upside down when Aconite received devastating news. He had been diagnosed with cancer. The diagnosis was like a thunderclap, ripping through the family's fragile stability. Aconite's illness was severe, and the reality of it hard. It wasn't just the physical toll of the disease, it was the emotional and financial storm that followed. The treatment began immediately, but it was a brutal journey. Doctors' visits, chemotherapy, and medication drained Aconite's energy and left him unable to work. So what had once been a steady source of income now vanished, and the medical bills mounted with each passing day. Lakhvir, already feeling the weight of her unspoken dreams, was now carrying an even heavier burden. She found herself trying to hold everything together emotionally, financially, and physically, managing the household, taking care of the children, and supporting a husband who was fading before her eyes, all while watching their finances crumble. The life she had once known seemed to slip farther away, and the pressure began to crack the foundation of the life they had built. To cope with the mounting medical bills and the strain of providing for her family, Lakhvir made a decision. She decided to rent out part of their home. The extra income was crucial, and renting out a few rooms seemed like the perfect solution. Little did she know, this decision would lead to an unexpected twist in her life. One of the tenants who moved in was a young man named Lakhvir Singh. At just 20 years old, Lucky had come to London with big dreams of his own. He was full of ambition, eager to make a life for himself in the city, and had family connections in England that helped him settle in quickly. So Lucky, like Lakhvir, came from a Punjabi background, and the two shared an instant natural bond. So they spoke the same language, understood each other's culture, and carried similar values, which provided a sense of comfort in this foreign land. For Lakhvir, whose life had become a constant whirlwind of hospital visits, managing her home and caring for her children, Lucky's presence offered a small but welcome escape. Her husband, Aconite, was frequently at the hospital battling cancer. His absence left Lakhvir alone, struggling to keep everything together. It was during these lonely times that Lucky became a source of solace for her. His youth, optimism, and energy reminded Lakhvir of the dreams she once held dear. What started as a landlord-tenant relationship soon turned into a genuine friendship. Lucky listened to her troubles without judgment, offering her a space to vent, to relax, and to simply be herself. But as the days passed, their friendship deepened. Lakhvir found herself sharing more than just her burdens with Lucky. The emotional connection between them grew, and before long, it blossomed into something neither of them expected: a passionate love affair. It was an affair that shocked Lakhvir, even as it unfolded. Here she was, a mother of 3, married to a man who was physically absent due to his illness, and now entangled in a relationship with a much younger man. For this connection with Lucky was something she hadn't felt in years: the excitement, the passion, the thrill of being desired. It was like a spark reignited something in her that had long been extinguished. The boundaries between landlord and tenant blurred. Lakhvir, who had once felt so lonely, found herself turning to Lucky for companionship, for support, and she began to treat him as if he were her husband. She washed his clothes, cooked his meals, cleaned his room, and, in the quiet of the night, they shared a bed. Lakhvir began showing him affection as though he were her true partner in life. But what started as a friendship and innocent comfort soon spiraled into something much more dangerous. And as their bond deepened, so did the tension, setting the stage for a devastating betrayal that would alter the course of all their lives. Months turned into years, and the affair between Lakhvir and Lucky grew stronger. What began as a spark of connection had now evolved into a secret that lasted nearly 16 years. Throughout this time, Lakhvir's emotions were tangled and her situation grew more complex. During the course of their relationship, Lakhvir became pregnant by Lucky several times. Each time she made the painful decision to have an abortion, hiding the truth from everyone. The weight of her choices, the guilt of keeping secrets, and the ever-growing strain on her conscience all began to chip away at her. There were moments when Lakhvir considered leaving her sick husband, Aconite, and marrying Lucky. The idea of starting fresh, of leaving behind the life she felt trapped in, seemed tempting. But then the reality of her family's expectations and the societal pressures in her home country of Punjab crept in. Divorce was a shameful act, something that could bring unbearable disgrace to her and her entire family. She feared the consequences, the whispers behind her back, the stares from relatives, and the judgment of the community. These fears held her back, leaving her torn between her desires and the weight of tradition. But as the years went by, the strain became unbearable. Lakhvir eventually found the courage to speak to Aconite during one of his hospital visits. The man she had once promised to love and care for now lay frail and weak from the toll of cancer. In a moment of raw honesty, Lakhvir confessed to him the truth, her feelings for Lucky, the emotional bond she had formed with him, and her struggles with their life together. Aconite, already suffering in his weakened state, listened to his wife's painful words, but he didn't react with anger or bitterness. Instead, he reminded her of the heavy consequences of divorce. He spoke of the social stigma, of the pain it would cause their children, and of the expectations that would follow her decision. His voice, though fragile, carried the weight of a man who had lost so much. He begged her to think carefully, to consider the path she was about to take. But Imagine the heartbreak for Ankar lying in a hospital bed, fighting for his life, while hearing the woman he loved tell him she had fallen in love with someone else. Lakhvir's heart was torn. The inner battle was intense. She didn't want to hurt Ankar, but she also couldn't deny the deep emotional connection she had with Lucky. After a lot of soul searching, Lakhvir made a decision. Divorce wasn't the answer, at least not for now. Instead, she chose to continue her relationship with Lucky, keeping it secret, living in a delicate balance. She would stay with Ankar, fulfilling her duty as a wife, but at the same time, she would keep Lucky close, filling the void in her life with the emotional support he provided. It was a painful, complicated decision, one that kept her trapped between love and duty, between the life she had built and the life she dreamed of. But in the end, it was a choice that would ultimately lead to an even darker path. It was November 2008, a time that marked a painful turning point in Lakhvir's life. 16 long years had passed since she and Lucky had first connected, and now, as she neared her 40s, the weight of those years began to feel heavier. Meanwhile, Lucky's family, concerned about his future and his lack of commitment, was determined to find him a wife. Lucky, now in his 30s, had been living in London for years, and his family felt it was time for him to settle down. They began searching for a suitable bride, someone with whom he could build a future, someone from a respected family with strong connections. The search led to Gurjit Kaur, a woman who also lived in London. Lucky's family arranged for them to meet, and though it wasn't initially his choice, Lucky decided to honor his family's wishes. When the two finally met, something unexpected happened. Gurjit's kindness and charm struck him deeply, and a connection began to form. Soon, they decided to marry. The families quickly set the date for the wedding, December 2008. It all seemed to happen so fast, as if it had been destined to unfold this way. But when Lucky shared the news with Lakhvir, everything changed. It felt like a nightmare unfolding before her eyes. The man she had poured her heart and soul into, for 16 years, the man she had treated like her own husband, even though they had never officially been married, was now leaving her for someone else. Lakhvir's world came crashing down. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't understand how he could so easily let go of everything they had built together, the years of love, secrecy, and sacrifice. Heartbroken and desperate, Lakhvir tried to convince Lucky to reconsider. She begged him to remember all the years they had spent together, the late nights, the stolen moments, and the emotional bond they had forged. She reminded him of all the sacrifices she had made, how she had supported him and cared for him during his difficult times, even when he had nothing to offer in return. But Lucky's response was cold and final. He explained that their relationship could never be legitimate in his family's eyes. No matter how much love they had shared, they could never marry, and he owed it to his family to settle down with the woman they had chosen. His mind was made up. Despite Lakhvir's pleas, despite the years of devotion, Lucky was determined to marry Gurjit and move forward with his life. In that moment, Lakhvir realized that the man she had spent nearly 2 decades of her life with was no longer hers. The dream she had held onto for so long of a life with Lucky was slipping through her fingers. She was left with nothing but the bitter reality that, for him, their connection was no longer enough. It was a devastating blow, one that would have lasting consequences for them both. Lakhvir's heart was a storm of emotions, hurt, anger, and a consuming sense of betrayal. The man she had loved for so many years, the man she had sacrificed everything for, was slipping away from her. The thought of him marrying someone else was unbearable. She couldn't imagine a life without him. As the reality sank in, her sorrow twisted into something darker rage. She wanted to hold on to him, but deep down, she knew she could not. Yet there was a part of her that refused to accept this. In her mind, she thought, if he can't be mine, then he shouldn't belong to anyone else. And with that thought, a sinister plan began to take root. Lakhvir was no longer the woman she once was. The pain of his decision had twisted her into someone unrecognizable, consumed by jealousy and desperation. She thought she could not live in a world where Lucky belonged to someone else. And so, in her mind, there was only one way to solve this: she would stop the marriage, no matter the cost. She didn't just want to win him back, she wanted to erase the possibility of him ever being with Gurjit, and in her mind, this could only be achieved if Lucky was no longer alive. With her resolve hardening, Lakhvir made a journey to India. There, she sought out a rare and deadly plant known for its medicinal uses, but capable of causing death if misused. She knew exactly how to handle it. With calculated precision, she bought the plant, carefully hiding it, fully aware of its dangerous potential. This would be her weapon. Returning to London in December, just before Christmas, Lakhvir put on a facade of normalcy. Her outward appearance was calm, masking the turmoil within. Lucky, still planning his wedding to Gurjit, had decided to move out of her home and start fresh in a new apartment nearby. Despite his physical absence, Lakhvir clung to their connection, constantly visiting him, trying to change his mind. But with every visit, she saw that his decision was unwavering. He was moving on with his life, and Lakhvir couldn't stand it. Her plan was set into motion. So one evening, Lakhvir invited Lucky over to her house for a meal, a gesture they had shared countless times before. But this meal was different. Lakhvir told him, "Let me cook for you one last time," just like old times. Lucky, trusting her, agreed without hesitation. Little did he know, this meal would be the last he would ever eat. As she prepared the food, Lakhvir took great care to add the poison from the plant she had brought from India. Her hands were steady, her mind focused, knowing that once the meal was served, there would be no turning back. The poison she added was lethal, and she was determined to carry out her dark plan, driven by the twisted belief that if she couldn't have Lucky, no one else could. The meal was ready, and with it, so was Lakhvir's final, irreversible decision. Lakhvir's emotions were in turmoil as she watched Lucky eat the meal, unaware of the poison lurking within. As soon as he finished, the symptoms began to show: sweating, difficulty breathing, and weakness. His body reacted violently to the poison, and in a panic, he managed to call 999 for help. The emergency services arrived swiftly, and he was rushed to the hospital, where doctors quickly suspected foul play. However, they initially believed his exposure to harmful chemicals at work was the cause, given his job at a chemical factory. They did not suspect that the danger had come from someone he trusted. Lucky's survival was a result of quick intervention and the fact that the poison's dose had been relatively small, and he was admitted to the hospital, where he slowly began to recover, grateful for his second chance at life. During his time there, Lakhvir visited him often, her concern for him veiling her darker intentions. It was during one of these visits that Lakhvir encountered Gurjit Kaur, the woman Lucky was set to marry. The meeting was tense, though Lakhvir concealed her feelings of anger and jealousy behind a polite smile. So as the first time Lakhvir had come face to face with the woman who was about to take the place in Lucky's life that she had once occupied. As Lucky introduced Gurjit to Lakhvir on Valentine's Day 2009, he spoke eagerly of his future plans with her. It was clear that he had moved on, his mind set on the future with Gurjit by his side. For Lakhvir, the moment was like a punch to the gut. Her long simmering feelings of possessiveness and jealousy exploded within her, and she struggled to mask the chaos inside. Seeing Lucky with Gurjit, so happy and full of hope for the future, made Lakhvir's heart burn with resentment. How could he move on so easily after everything they had shared? How could he let her go? So the sight of them together confirmed to Lakhvir that Lucky was no longer hers. Even though her previous attempt to poison him had failed, she was still not ready to let go. She couldn't bear the thought of him marrying Gurjit. The jealousy gnawed at her, feeding her desperation, and before long the dark plan was set in motion again. On January 27, 2009, Lakhvir visited Lucky's house, where she found him and Gurjit together. She greeted them with a false smile and congratulated them on their upcoming wedding. With a calm, almost too serene demeanor, she offered to cook for them once more. "I've cooked for you both many times over the years. Let me make you one last meal to celebrate your new life together," she said, hiding the venom in her voice. Gurjit and Lucky, trusting her completely, accepted her offer, unaware of the deadly intentions behind her gesture. So Lakhvir prepared the meal carefully, making sure to add a much stronger dose of poison this time, one that would be fatal. As she mixed the poison into the food, her heart raced with anticipation. She believed this time there would be no turning back. She was sure the poison would act quickly, ending Lucky's life and ensuring that he would never marry Gurjit, that he would never leave her. Lakhvir set the table and served the meal, her hands steady as she watched them eat.
My home.
Okay, is your girlfriend conscious?
Yeah,
Is she awake?
same like me. But we are very worried because
Okay, so what makes you think somebody poisoned your food?
she was my ex-girlfriend. She came to visit me.
You think your ex-girlfriend's done it?
Yeah.
The investigation into Lucky's death and Gurjit's near-fatal poisoning quickly took a dramatic turn. The authorities were deeply concerned about the case, but the challenge they faced was immense. There was no direct evidence linking the poison to Lakhvir, no fingerprints on the plant or any physical proof that the curry had been laced with poison. The fact that Lakhvir had prepared the meal did raise suspicion, but there was no concrete evidence to prove her involvement. The police were left trying to piece together what had happened. Gurjit, still recovering in the hospital, was questioned by the police. She recalled the events of the day in a shaky voice, remembering how she and Lucky had sat down to the meal that Lakhvir had so graciously prepared. She described how Lucky had eaten heartily, taking 2 pieces of the fish curry, while she had eaten less, not liking the taste. The police took her statement seriously, but they knew they needed more to build a case. As the investigation progressed, the police began to focus on Lakhvir. They discovered her history with Lucky and her deep emotional attachment to him, her obsession with him, the failed poisoning attempt earlier, and the increasingly hostile behavior towards Gurjit all pointed to a motive. But still, they needed to prove that she had poisoned the meal intentionally. So Lakhvir was arrested and her trial began. The prosecution presented a strong case detailing Lakhvir's troubled relationship with Lucky, her jealousy, and the failed poison attempt from earlier in the year. They argued that Lakhvir had deliberately tried to poison Lucky, not once but twice, and that her desperation had driven her to this point. However, the defense team countered with the lack of physical evidence. The defense lawyer suggested that there was no direct proof of Lakhvir's involvement in the poisoning. They argued that it was impossible to know exactly how the poison had gotten into the curry, and whether Lakhvir had indeed been the one to tamper with it. The courtroom drama escalated as both sides made compelling arguments. The defense tried to cast doubt on the prosecution's claims, while the prosecution worked hard to expose the pattern of Lakhvir's behavior and the motive behind her actions. But despite their efforts, the case remained clouded with uncertainty. So as the trial drew to close, the judge was faced with the challenge of making a fair decision without solid proof. So the case was no easy task, and the question of whether Lakhvir would be convicted of murder or attempted murder hung in the balance. The judge was careful in his deliberations, aware that without conclusive evidence, a miscarriage of justice could occur. The jury was tasked with deciding if they believed Lakhvir had intentionally poisoned Lucky, even though the evidence was circumstantial. The court waited, holding its breath, as the jury deliberated. The fate of Lakhvir was in their hands, and no one knew how the case would unfold. The police worked relentlessly to connect the dots and gather crucial evidence against Lakhvir. Their breakthrough came when they discovered the suspicious packets in her possession, which ultimately linked her to the poisoning. The coordinated effort between the London and Indian authorities played a critical role in unearthing the truth. When the court finally delivered its verdict, it was a somber moment for everyone involved. The life sentence handed down to Lakhvir not only marked the end of a tragic story, but also served as a reminder of the destructive power of jealousy and obsession. A case left many unanswered questions about the depth of Lakhvir's emotions and what had driven her to such extreme actions. So what do you think about the case? Do you believe justice was served, or was the punishment too harsh? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to turn on notifications for more updates on true crime stories. Thank you for watching.